I was thinking what you
Thank you. Yep.
Alright, guys. Mics are up.
Studio silence.
Studio's live. Yeah, it's a cacophony of sounds this morning here on Smooth Breakfast. You're listening to Folu and myself.
Valentine.
And this morning, just in time to give you detailed analysis of our newspaper stories this morning, Lagos. Join us by sending us messages through WhatsApp. Our WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981. You can also send it on Twitter to us on Twitter at Smooth981FM. Use that hashtag freshlypressed981. Last but not the least, you can see us in the studio on YouTube. Just type in the search box if you're trying to find us. Type Smooth981FM Lagos. As we're streaming live, you can see our wonderful faces and get to leave comments in the comment section. And joining us to do analysis, a detailed analysis of these stories, we have Mr. Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. Good morning.
Morning. I was trying to say in pidgin, but I couldn't remember you saying in pidgin. Oh gosh, help me.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay,
morning.
morning.
And then we have Funmi Odude. Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
And Ugo Dre. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Alright, find them all up on social media at Ugo Dre, at CCOG Lagos, at Funmi Odude. Lagos, very quickly, we'll go into the first part of the story.
All right, let's delve into the first story. Ugo Dre, I believe I'm coming to you for this particular one. So President Muhammad Buhari on Wednesday in Abuja ordered Professor Usman Yusuf, the Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance Scheme, to immediately proceed on administrative leave. Now, details of the story are in the New Telegraph, but of course, it's a story that we've been following for a bit of time. They're saying that the leave is a way to ensure unfettered investigation by the independent panel that's going to be inaugurated on Friday. Now, do you know that the president directed that with the establishment of this panel, which has 2 weeks to report its findings, there was an earlier body that had been set up by the governing council, but that now stands dissolved, which is rather curious. But what are your thoughts?
Story is kind of reminiscent of the Maynard story. That's the guy
Yes.
that was in charge of pensions.
Yes.
So sometime last year, Professor Yusuf was removed by the Minister of Health for malpractices and suspicion of corruption charges. I think that was in July or something.
Yes.
And then I think early this year, I think, and then he was reinstated by President Buhari. In a rather bizarre way. And apparently, the staff of the NHIS were quite livid. It was somebody that they didn't like his leadership style. They felt that he wasn't, transparent enough. A lot of malpractices came forth, and I think he had his own camp. They had their own camp, and this has gone on for months. And then I think the NHIS, the governing body,
Council.
they
yes.
came together again, took him out, suspended him.
Yes.
And then
we had the SGF saying, "Well, you can't do that."
Yeah, you can't do that. You have to go through some kind of process. In fact, I think it was a bit of there was a time he was coming in. I think he was coming in, and then
He showed up
were
with
like
police.
placards. And
Yes.
it's crazy. And,
He showed up with police and forced his way back into the building after he'd been asked to leave.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is that a lot of the staff of the NHIS have basically, in fact, a lot of them have been pushing in stories in the media as well about the guy. This serious campaign to get that guy out. I really don't know what he did. I mean, it'd be nice. I think setting up his body is good. I hope they're independent and transparent enough. It's better for people to know than to be proven guilty.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So even if there's suspicions of corruption by charges of malpractice, on this cause. So I hope that this committee we set up will at least stick to the terms of reference, and then let's get to the bottom of this. But I just hope it's not a long drawn process. We can't afford to wait for that 3 months.
No, they said 2 weeks, so let's just hope.
After 2 weeks, what next?
Ugo Dre, thank you very much for that. Clear and to the point. And we keep it moving. Up next, Nigeria slips in ease of doing business ranking. This story I've taken from The Guardian. And when you see the headlines, for me, automatically you just think, oh my goodness, everything's falling apart. What a disaster. The people who are very anti this particular administration, of which there's a strong negative sentiment trending now when it comes to this administration, will say, hey, you see, we told you so. However, when we look at the details of the story, even though it does say that the nation has faltered in bureaucracy busting economies, especially in areas of property registration and insolvency, transparency, it points out that we've dropped one place. We were 145th. This is out of 190 countries, economies that are being tracked. Now we're 146th.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Like you rightly said, it's not another wow, we're falling back. When you look at the fact that we moved from 169th to 145th in 2017, dropping one spot in 2018 is not good. Nobody is going to pat them on the backs, but it's not reason to start tearing out your head. But in order to always do better, we should look at the places where they say we're doing okay and the places where they say we are not, and improve on those places. So the major areas where we still have issues and probably cost us to lose that one spot are bureaucracy, which is not completely surprising, especially in areas of property registration and insolvency resolution. Now, those two areas are very important because when you think of business, property is tied to everything. And, I think we would not completely get that right. Property registration is just a little bit of it until we look at our Land Use Act and the fact how difficult it almost is for you to get property and then register in this country. And insolvency resolution, my God, it is a headache in Nigeria. When we and it ties to a lot of things. It ties to banking policies. It ties to, because we have a lot of irresponsible loans going out, bad debt, and very complicated ways of trying to get them out. I mean, most people don't take advantage of. You hear a lot of bankruptcy proceedings outside the country. You don't take a lot of advantage of it in this, even though it's a process that is available in the law.
Why do you think that is? Especially bearing in mind that very recently AMCON also released that list of billion debtors.
Oh God,
which is quite a massive list.
It is. AMCON was created to sort of like solve the problem, but I also think it's to solve the problem in a way to save the banks, in a way to save shareholders' deposits. So they're supposed to absorb the shock that it would. But I'm not sure if it is now encouraged us to even lend more irresponsibly. AMCON is there to sort out the bad debts
and that's an issue with the attitude. So very quickly also, I do want to ask, looking at the area of property, all right, and property registration from a legal perspective, are there any reforms happening looking at the laws around the way land is dealt with in Nigeria?
The thing about it is the body that was set up to look at this ease of doing business that has led to this is a federal government body. Land is mostly a state issue. So the land is vested in the governor of the state on behalf of, and each state sort of has its own process. And it is one of the highest revenue generating areas for any state government. The way in which they charge the tax and everything, it would be a lot easier if we digitize these things. But it's something that we've found difficult to do, even in the progressive, what we would term the progressive states. I'm not sure why it's that difficult, but I mean, property registration could take any time between 6 months to 3 years.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on that. Ms. Ireti, let's move on to this next story. Something that we've been looking at and talking about for a bit of time has been education in this country. Now, the Daily Times tells us every child counts. It's the name of the new education policy that has been announced by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. Now, he's saying that in a population like Nigeria, where the nation is over half of our country is made up of people below the age of 20, it's something that does need to be addressed. They're saying that they want to focus on young people being productive, so they're working on far-reaching skills-based curriculum. Skills-based, which is important, looking at science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The curriculum will include coding and computer programming, design thinking and computer-generated imaging, animation and graphics design, robotics, networking, and basic engineering applications. And they're working with a number of top-level people, including MIT, Oracle Academy, Microsoft, and IBM. Your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are positive. This is positive. Again, I don't know about the rest of you, but I often don't like when we tag things that should be something that should be normal. We give it a tag name so every child counts. But I guess maybe you need to do that in order to promote these things so people remember.
It.
Yeah,
like
to
Black Lives Matter.
Exactly, yes. Well, Similar, but not quite. But because in this case, when we're talking education, we have the government has a responsibility to educate every child. So we're having to be reminded again, or is it that they're reminding themselves? Do you get my point? Every child counts. I love what they're doing. However, when you go further into the story, it's all very smart. It's really smart. He talks about the N-Power. He talks about how 3,000 of the students or the graduates the young people they have on the N-Power program are currently being trained in animation skills and techniques. And, they found that young people take to it so easily. Well, of course, young people take to it so easily. The best brains are young brains because they're malleable. You're able to sink in information and just bombard it, and they don't have to think about NEPA and electricity like the rest of us and school fees. So that for me is rather stating the obvious. But again, so he said 2 million pieces. So their first target is at least 2 million pupils in the first year. Well, that's far too small in a country where we have over 180 million people. 50% of them are young. That 50%, that you then take that 50% and go lower, and it's just 2 million is just too minute. It's too tiny. But I guess the intention is there. So we must, how should I say, we must applaud them for what they're doing. Every child counts. Now, let me move on. We can do all of this. It's all very smart, all very tight, put in new structures. Gosh, you can have those structures standing on ladders, standing in the middle of every single community. However, if you don't have superintendents who are going to ensure that they go into every home, and it's going to cost money. And I think that's where the money should be spent. We're going to go into every home and make sure that every child in that home has been sent to school, because lots of parents are still not sending their children to school. Okay, now the government keep encouraging and they keep talking and they keep promoting education, and I love it. But at the end of the day, this boils down to us as Nigerians. This boils down to us as parents. If we don't want our children educated, they won't be educated. So every child counts. Well, every child's education needs to count for the parent. Otherwise, this is just it just becomes yet another smart, initiative that would just go away. Yeah, I really, really like it. I mean, they want to go into the rural areas and stuff. You have to think about poverty as well when you talk about education. The government are giving 5,000 a month, which is what this administration is doing. Yeah. One of the things that people forget, if you send your child to school, you get 5,000 a month, okay? Are they doing that? Are parents doing that? Or are parents still being greedy and sending their children? Exactly.
I think the 5,000 is meant to be for the poorest.
That's right. Well, absolutely. But what I'm saying is it's if you send your child to school. You don't just get it for the sake of it. Okay. So are you doing that is the question. Do you understand? I mean, an education is free and they're feeding them in primary schools for free. What more do we want our government to do?
Well, here's the question for you. Speedy saying, what more do we want our government to do before we move on from this story? He does say that, they envision a new classroom structure that permits cultivation, expression, and early adoption of skills that will function in the environment that is already being created. Now, I find that interesting because we've also had a lot of discussion and controversy surrounding teachers and the quality of the teachers that we have. It's interesting that this policy doesn't mention exactly how they're going to equip teachers and make sure that teachers are able to do all of this, to create a culture that permits expression. As we know, children tend to be shouted down, beaten into silence here. Unfortunately, that's what we experience.
It's a good point that you bring up, and I think what Prof, as I'm fondly love to call him, and I am very fond of this man, I think that's Prof saying what you've just said in a nice way, kind of thing. Literally, look, the one problem that I have with teachers in Nigeria when it comes to primary education is, number one, stop sending 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds home with like 6 homework. Stop it. It's lazy. It's because the teachers don't do the work in the classroom, so they bombard the children, and children are supposed to play and learn. That's the best way to grow. Exactly. That's number one. Number two is we must encourage our children to speak out. The problem in Nigeria is we have a genuflecting culture, which basically, if I'm talking, who's talking? How many of you are talking? Look down when I'm talking to you. Don't look up. Look at no, let the child express. Gosh, encourage them to speak, because when they speak, they learn. I encourage my son to challenge me, not rudely, but challenge what I'm saying, and that's how he and I get into a discussion. So yes, I hope so, but I doubt if we will, because the teachers are not nice.
Baby steps. From clap dance, this that.
All right.
Some pigeon for you. Some pigeon question for you.
Yes.
This day, a newspaper is up next with this story. The NLC backs out of minimum wage negotiations. And for me, we know that this story there's so many versions across the different national dailies. It's become very messy. Essentially, Comrade Mr. Ayuba Waba is saying that he wants to correct the impression that there was a stalemate during the tripartite negotiations. He insists that the issue of 30,000 minimum wage was conclusively resolved and that the report was signed, and he wants the president to make that report public so the matter will be laid to rest. However, we also have in other papers the vice president coming out to say, no, we haven't agreed on anything. You've got the governor saying, no, what we're suggesting is 22,500. You've got another report saying we're going to reveal the names of the governors, the states that don't want to pay the 30,000. Your thoughts on this for me?
Yeah, like you rightly said, it's getting very, very messy. Okay, so the position that the Labour is taking is that we had a meeting and everybody seemed to agree to 30,000. Some signed, some said, oh, I'll sign later, but that there was an agreement. And so they sort of feel like the governors that agreed at the meeting have been intimidated into coming down to 22,500. So apparently the governors had their own separate meeting after the Labour meeting, and the Governors Forum came up with the 22,500. Now this 22,500 that is being rejected by Labour as not having been agreed to is also being rejected by the federal government as being too high. So it's a very messy issue. Are we looking towards another strike?
Today is Thursday.
Yes, we have Tuesday. I know that strikes might not look like they make so much impact in a state like Lagos where there's a lot of private businesses, but there are states that completely shut down.
Yes.
Ugo Dre, you had something you wanted to chip in?
No, just trying to put it into perspective. At 22,500 naira, that's like 750 a day.
Yeah.
I mean, can
But
you survive on that?
Minimum.
But
750.
That's entry level.
It's we're
But is
always
that
going
the-
to have this chicken and egg
Exactly.
situation.
Exactly.
Can we afford it?
That's my question. Can we afford it?
Can people
the
survive?
economic
No,
head. Can the inflation afford it?
No, there's a trade-off, and what we've always said is that wages for civil servants actually has to go up, but the civil servants also need to understand that you need to cut civil service jobs. There's just so many of them, so let's cut down a lot of the pork in there. So reduce civil service job, reform it, and let's have a lot more intelligent people in there, and then you can start to increase salaries.
I
It's
tell
a
you what, we
trade-off.
can't afford more time on the topic.
Nice one, Folu. Thank you. Moving on to this day newspaper for this next story. 2019 elections. Traditional rulers expressed concern over security in local communities. Here, it was an address that was given by the leader, or one of the representatives of the leaders, actually, of the National Council of Traditional Rulers in Nigeria, from Rivers State, Eleme of Eleme Kingdom in Rivers State, Dr. Apollos Chu. He said, giving reassurance to the government and the people of Nigeria ahead of the 2019 elections, that they're going to do their part to ensure that the security of lives and property, especially for those conducting the elections. What are your thoughts on this, Ireti?
Well, look, the traditional rulers are very important. We know how important they are to our community in every aspect of this society, and the powers that they have, especially within those communities, they can literally even change the course of an election, which is why they're often quoted by politicians, aren't they? So it's good that they're all coming together, that they're expressing concern earlier on, and they're saying, look, we need tight security in our communities. What I don't see is what they are going to do differently. That's what I don't see in this story, because it's often easy in Nigeria to say, oh, we implore you to have good security. We're asking everybody to behave accordingly, etc., etc. But you are the rulers. What are you going to do differently? I would like to hear from them saying, like, we've done this, we've done that, we've spoken to this, we've called a meeting, we've spoken to INEC. This is how it's going to be organized in our area. Nobody's going to be allowed out after a particular time. Whatever it is that they need to do. But I'm not hearing that here. I'm hearing them just the usual cry out. It's just a cry out before the elections, and then
So while it may seem to maybe you and a few other people like they're just crying out because election is close, so they need their voices to be heard, so they can be taken care of, so to speak, quote unquote. They are very important in the scheme of things because they are highly respected in their communities.
That's
People
what I
listen to
said.
them.
Yes,
The youth listen to them. They pay attention to them. So let's hope this is a step in the right direction. Thank you very much, Mr. Ireti. Let's move on to this next story from Punch newspaper. Kaduna refinery stays dormant as NNPC loses 10.96 billion naira. There was a loss recorded within, I think, that's around the month of June 2018. They said the trading surplus dropped from 18.11 billion naira in May to 7.15 billion naira in June of this same year, Ugo. What are your thoughts on this? And I mean, looking at the 6-month period and the record, what the records show so far.
It's not an official document out yet, so usually NNPC publishes this on its website. I think the latest one they have was in May. So
NNPC publishes
yeah,
information.
they've been doing that since
Awesome.
This administration came on. Yeah.
How about
they've been
reports
doing
of the budgets and how they
that. They
spend
do
money on
budget
subsidy?
and their actual budget revenue and expenditure and actual revenue and expenditure. They've been doing that since 2015. Where have you been, Valentine?
I mean, we've been raising questions about transparency.
They have. So you
on
can
that
actually
point.
see, and it's an interesting report. So basically, what the story is saying is that Kaduna refinery actually hasn't been producing for some months now.
Yeah.
Haven't been refining crude
yeah.
for some months now. However, what I really don't get is that they actually take in crude, but they don't refine. So what happens to that crude? Yeah, like is it stored somewhere, for future refining capacity? So if you move out of this, what about other refineries? A lot of the refineries are doing below 30% capacity. So these guys also take on crude, but they don't refine as much as the capacity. NNPC as a whole, I think, makes an average of about, they've done about 60-something billion or thereabout in terms year to date in terms of revenue. But the downstream side of the NNPC, that's where you have this refineries and PPMC,
Yes.
cost the NNPC about 8 billion naira in losses every month. That's incredible. So you ask yourself, what are we doing with these refineries? Like we've had these refineries for decades, and at least since we got into democracy, it's just never worked. It's never gone past. They've never been able to achieve their maximum capacity utilization. But we keep spending money there. So the amount of money you make from the upstream side of NNPC is basically reduced by the losses that you made make from the downstream side. On upstream, you're making about 170 billion year to date, but downstream chucks up everything, and then at the end of the day, NNPC is making just slightly over 60 billion. So I think as a country, it's something that we have to deal with. Labour on the other hand might not want it. I think the government has tried a few times to privatize NNPC or to even sell it. But you see Pengasing and Nupen coming out and saying no, you can't sell it. But then this is just
That's a very clear angle. Yes, I mean, bring in hands, professionals, if possible, foreign explorers or people who have better capacity to refine and bring up more yields to actually come into the country and take over this.
I mean, it's not just they don't want it, and they're being very dogmatic about it. But I feel like by the time the so-called the much-awaited Dangote refinery comes on, and a lot of the small refineries that the government are basically licensing, they all come on stream. What's going to happen to Kaduna refinery and Port refinery and Warri refinery? It's just going to go moribund.
Yeah, but are they
Same thing
working?
that happens tonight. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
That's just what's the
They're below
point?
capacity, but we
Yeah,
keep spending money, and people are
exactly,
there
close
who
them
work,
down.
and these guys get salaries every month.
Yeah. And when is Dangote coming on? Do we know?
No, not yet.
2020.
Well, when I'm about 60.
Nice. From Vanguard newspaper, I have this next story. Over 863 billion naira subsidy. Senate gives federal government 1 week to meet with CBN, DMO, stakeholders, all marketers. The ultimatum is there, and they've asked the constituted committees to look into this. They said the Senate committee actually yesterday asked the Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, to mandate the Director General of the Debt Management Office, Mrs. Patience Oneha, to call a meeting of stakeholders that would include the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, and all marketers, I'm sure, to address money issues and how they can make sure that the problem goes away. They said the subsidy payments as outstanding stands at over 863 billion naira. Ugo.
I mean, this basically points to what Funmi was saying earlier about ease of doing business. It's incredibly tough doing business in this country. Mind you, this is subsidy payment that was actually before this government came on board. So it's not like, it's this government's subsidy, because NNPC has basically been the sole importer of fuel for the last 3 years or thereabout. So this is like backlog of subsidy payment. Sometime earlier this year, the government said, okay, you know what, this is what we're going to do. Not just subsidy payments, we are owing contractors in general about 2-point-something trillion. So you can imagine, so people who've made supplies to the government for years, they still haven't been paid, right? 2-point-something trillion. The government says, we don't have this money to pay. So they came up with this idea of a promissory note. and they said, okay, we're going to give contractors promissory notes, and then so promissory note basically is government gives you a promise that we're going to pay you at so and so date. So you can actually take that note and go and discount it at the bank, right, and then get your money up front, and then the banks will go after the government to get their money, something like that. So that was just to inject some kind of liquidity. And the government came then and said, look, part of the Eurobond money that they borrowed back then was going to be used to pay down some of these contractors. But here we are still arguing, we still don't know what exactly they're owing. The subsidies, the government, between the DMO and the CBN, they're still going back and forth reconciling. And this is money that should have gone into the economy by now. So it's incredible that you can actually do business with the government. No matter how transparent you try to be, you still don't get paid. The promissory notes, government hasn't fulfilled its own part of the promissory note. They keep dealing, they keep wasting time reconciling. And these guys are out there, they don't have their money, they can't even import anymore. So, it's just part of that, part of the challenges that we see with doing business in Nigeria. I don't see how this government is going to pay this money between now and election period. It's not an election matter yet. Maybe if Atiku jumps on it, they can decide to now pay. But for now, well,
that doesn't seem to help investor. To help address the
it doesn't at all. It doesn't. So nobody's, like I said, nobody's going to want to import refined crude into this country. And personally as well, I think that for anybody who's doing contract with the government, it's incredibly difficult to want to do it or to do contract with the government without kickbacks, because that's why people do. That's why you see kickbacks, because you do contract with the government, you're not even sure when you're going to get money, and it also adds the cost of governance as well, because a lot of contractors now have to pad up their invoices to make up for a lot of all these challenges that they face. So that's the situation. So for now, this 860 billion, they are still going back and forth with the argument, and we don't
that's everywhere. That's everywhere. Let's move on to talk about examination malpractice. So, Senator Adeleke has been arraigned and risks 10-year jail term if convicted. That's according to a report from Daily Times newspaper. So the PDP candidate in the recently concluded governorship election in Osun State, Senator Adeleke, he was arraigned yesterday with 4 other accused persons on a 4-count charge before the Federal High Court in Abuja over alleged involvement in examination malpractice. And the other defendants, one of them is his brother, Sikiru Adeleke, and some others, Alhaji Areboshala Mufutal, who's the principal of the Ojo Aro Community Grammar School. We heard the story a while back, before the election started, and the government asked them to halt and proceed right after. What are your thoughts?
Gosh, you've got to breathe, haven't you?
Yeah.
Senator Ademola Adeleke,
Don't start dancing.
Senator Onijo Oga Olodo. Right, I had to sing that song because seriously, you've got to ask yourself, this is what they're being accused of. You couldn't make this up. This is not Nollywood. Couldn't be Hollywood. It couldn't be a blockbuster. The defendants are accused of fraudulently, through impersonation, registering as students of Ojoaro Community Grammar School to enable them sit for the National Examination Council, NECO, examinations of June-July 2017. I don't know, how old is Adeleke? I've just got to ask a question. Honestly, I wish we had more time on this story. It's so bombastic. You're just in shock. So, so they've been accused. They've been arraigned. They're like, it's possibly the jail term is really long. I wonder if they will end up going to jail. Now, here's what the school headmaster, etc., the court said to them. Acting in concert, they've been acting in concert, that's quote unquote, while saddled with the responsibility of registering students for NECO in 2017. They breached that duty by registering Senator, I have to say it again, Senator Ademola Adeleke, Boda Onijo Ogbeni Olodo, Sikiru Adeleke as students of the school in 2017. You couldn't make it up.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
You couldn't make it up.
Just to touch on the last story very briefly, from Punch newspaper, is really sad one. Missing General Army finds corpse in abandoned well. Fumi, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so very quickly, because we don't have time, the army has said we're giving 3 assignments. 1 was to find the general, whether dead or alive. 2 was to find his vehicle, and 3 was to find those responsible. So we can give them 2 over 3. The most important one, why? Let's know what happened and those responsible.
We'll follow it very closely.
Thank you very much for that. We'll round up with a couple of messages very quickly up on our live stream. We have got Jelu, who says every child counts becomes even more exciting when you look at the areas of study: computer programming, engineering, robotics. Osinbajo for president, Buhari for EFCC chairman. While Guru from Ikeja, yes, he really wrote that. Guru from Ikeja says, as much as I do like every child counts, the government also needs to look at the money or rich by any means culture that it promotes unknowingly. Why would a parent want to send their child to school when they see politicians getting stupidly wealthy without having to go through this educational hassle? And finally, we've got this one in a, well, no, there's no name to that one, from Bolaho, who says, Kaduna refinery is consuming crude oil but no refined products. Wait till you hear the reason. The crude oil is being used to appease the gods or evil spirits of our refineries.
Wow.
Those spirits that have been hindering our refining process since all that were done.
Lagos, in 15 minutes, we'll be talking entertainment inside of the grapevine. Thank you very much for listening, and special thanks to our analysts for coming in. Sisi Ogie, Lagos, at Ugo Dre, at Funmi Odude. Good morning.
You can find my track on iTunes.
All right.
When you need your